Setting up your webinar.
It says it's streaming live on YouTube.
Okay, guess what? We are live on YouTube. And so setting up your webinar. Here we go.
Great.
All right, we are ready to go. So it is DigCit Week.
Yay.
And I am so happy that we're kicking it off, talking about media literacy. And I'm really excited that we get to talk about media literacy to kick this off, because I feel like sometimes we're like in two separate camps.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
And really what you and I have been able to do is really talk about that they belong together. It's like mashed potatoes and peas.
Absolutely.
So I'm so excited that, Belina, you're here. And I don't even remember, for our own history and our story, I feel like I've just always known you.
I think we've known each other through other things like YouTube, Twitter and other social networks. And then we finally connected and kind of things happened.
Things happened. And there was like it was like mashed potatoes and peas. We've had this like combination where they're not two separate entities. But, you know, in the digital citizenship world, sometimes there's that perception that media literacy is something that's separate. So I would love for you just to like share your thoughts about like, what's media literacy? Why is it not a standalone?
Well, so I personally believe that you can't actually be a digital citizen without being media literate. And I don't think you can be media literate without being a digital citizen. And the reason why is because in order for you to exist in our society as a citizen, whether you are online or whether you are offline or in any way, shape, or form, you need to know about the world that you're in. And since the digital piece of citizenship is about the interaction with the digital part, what do you do with that? How do you interact with that? And media literacy is really about the ability to think about it, to understand it, to understand who you are, how you bring your viewpoint to the world, how you may bring your own bias into the world, and how to understand other people's biases. And, you know, the official definition is the ability to access, analyze, evaluate, and produce. And that is true. I think
will you say all those again?
The ability to access, analyze, evaluate, produce, or create media. And the reality is that in the digital citizenship world, that's exactly what kids are doing. And that's what people are doing. So you can't actually have one without the other. And I always kind of feel like it's a partnership. It's not an exclusive entity that's separate from one another.
And, you know, I love just the part, and I asked you to repeat it because I feel like a lot of times, you know, there's that focus on like consumption or how long, you know,
Sure.
Students have that screen time, and that idea that how can we get beyond just being a consumer and being a producer. So you had mentioned that as one of the.
Absolutely. And I think, I mean, I don't mean to cut you off, but I think what I really think is important about the work that you do is that it isn't just about the screen time. I feel like for a lot of digital citizenship groups, it's very much a protectionist approach. And I appreciate that to a certain extent. We do need to protect our youngest. We definitely need to be aware of certain things. But being a digital citizen is a lot more than that. It's more involved. And I think there's such a perfect example in the things that even your son does online, and the things that I've heard of other students doing online, and the students that I've seen do things online. It is more about how you exist in that space. And yes, should we be concerned about screen time? Okay, yeah, we absolutely should. I don't want to take that away from that. That definitely has a place. But I also think that we need to acknowledge that a lot of really good work happens in the space with kids. And that's the things that get lost along the way. And I think that's the production piece of media literacy. I look at media as an outgrowth of the things that we love and the things that we hate. It's a combination of things. And in order for us to be a part of that, we have to appreciate both sides. And I don't think that you can be in the world of media literacy, certainly, without seeing that. And I don't think as someone who's in digital citizenship, you can also separate them because they coexist in the same space.
You know, I saw on Twitter today, I have not seen this book, but I would like to get this book. I actually went to Barnes and Noble after I saw this on Twitter, and they couldn't even find it. Like, it wasn't even in their database. So I think I'm going to have to like jump on like Amazon to look it up, but Legacy versus Likes by Mike Smith.
Oh, I don't know this one.
No. So I can just even show you.
Okay.
Screenshot, but I saw this and I was tagged this morning. And, you know, that idea of likes. And when I think about like, you know, media,
Sure.
I think about how many times our young people are getting so obsessed with
the likes
and like taking things down and putting things back up because at a better time when you'll have, you know, more people looking or what have you, or even like, you know, back to even with the media, some of the comments when you see, I am still appalled. I mean, I've been in this field for a while, but I still am shocked when I see how people, like, we've lost this idea of civil discourse.
Right.
You know, I can have a different opinion, but I could still be in the same space. I feel like actually I do have a different opinion than a lot of people I know, you know, even like my hockey group. So, you know, Curran plays hockey, and like even politically, I know that I'm different than the rest of some of the hockey families. And they say, oh, I'm so surprised that this isn't contentious or we're not, you know, at each other's throats or what have you, like what you see happening online. But what do you think is our, I don't know, what can we do to get back to that place of
speaking?
Yes. And listening, really listening.
Respectfully. I think the problem is, well, look, I think that when you're on a computer screen and you don't see the person or you're really not connected with that person, it's easier to say the things that you wouldn't say if you were looking at them face to face. I think that's actually probably the hardest thing to teach kids because they are used to being behind the screen. And when you're behind the screen, it's just a thing. It's not the person. And there is that disconnect. And I know I see a lot of things that people comment about, certainly on Twitter and certainly on YouTube videos. I mean, it's remarkable what people are willing to say. And the reality is, would you go walking up to someone and say it in person? And if you would, then I think that we have to have more of a discussion about how do we engage with each other. It's absolutely okay to have a difference of opinion. Absolutely okay. We should. In the world of media literacy, you have to expect to be sitting in a room with students who aren't going to like the same things that you like. And you're not going to necessarily like the things that they like. But you need to know that they exist and you need to be able to appreciate that somebody does like them and for whatever reasons that they do. And I think that's something that we all, both in the digital citizenship space and the media literacy space, can work on together. The community part, the way that we engage with each other is important. I think it's more important now than ever before. I think that the dialogue piece where we are actually having a conversation and communicating and not yelling at each other and not saying those things online, that's a big piece of this. I think that we also need to spend more time teaching our children about that.
And you know, that's back on us because right now I feel like our youngest learners don't have great examples from the adults in their life, you know? So it's definitely on all of us. And then I also think that there's a little bit of a misperception that like in real life, like I'd have to be literally with you. But like this moment right now is IRL, you know, even though we're sitting across a screen and that idea that how do we help our students and not just our students, but, you know, our adults as well, communities in general, to humanize the person sitting next to them. Because if you can't do that, you're not able to apply that to people around the world that might look differently, speak different languages, eat different food, practice different religion. And if you can't do that, then you can never be able to apply that to somebody across the screen. And that's really where.
Right. I think I actually spoke to someone recently who told me that they spend a lot of their time in classrooms now getting kids to look them in the eye. Because they spend so much time looking at the screen, they don't really ever look at you. And so, you know, when he is teaching or when he's engaging with students, he wants to make sure that they see that he's looking at them and that they are in turn responding by looking back. And that is really something interesting to think about. And certainly culturally, there are certain cultures that would not necessarily be acceptable. And we need to acknowledge that. But in general, in terms of what we see on an everyday basis, the disengagement of students because the technology has sort of superseded the interaction is real. And so I think in terms of being a digital citizen, we need to make sure that they understand that there is this next step. And the next step is the engagement part. It needs to be that there is an interaction, and it's a positive interaction, not a negative interaction. And should it be a negative interaction, how do you really want to address that? How do you really want that to be displayed? Because one of the things about the book that you just mentioned, Legacy versus Likes, I'm curious about the legacy piece, because ultimately this generation of students will have a legacy that lives online and doesn't live in the same way that we think of legacy in terms of our offline lives. It's very much a public persona of who they are, because it's there.
So true. I hadn't even thought about that aspect, the difference between how we would define it, I'd define it, compared to perhaps how Curran would define it. I even think about, and I'd love to just ask you, because I feel like this is probably the number one. How do you evaluate sources online? Like, what are the best ways, especially for Sit Week, for teachers to be able to give students opportunities to practice? Because that's really like, this isn't a one-time deal where we have the conversation, we put a check in the box. Like, this has to be ongoing. We embed these things. Right. And I know the being able to reliably decide what resources are, and I know that there's that big term, fake news, which I really makes me cringe every time I hear fake news now.
I know. I think what I would say to people is it's really hard with the media itself, the news media, because there is so much on every station that is biased. I mean, there's a lot of opinion news right now. What I would say is that I would look at more than one source, and I would look at the opposite source that you would normally engage with. Like, if you're not a Fox News person, then look at CNN. If you're not a CNN person, look at Fox. Look at them all, though. I would say look outside of us. Look at BBC. Look at how other people in the world are relaying news. It's not enough to watch one station any longer, because you will see a very clear, developed bias on whatever station. And so that's part of the problem with the news, is that it's so easy to call it fake news when the information isn't being projected in a way that actually is unbiased. And that's the most difficult thing. In terms of students, I always tell my college students, you need to go to multiple sources. If you're not certain, check multiple sources. But what I find fascinating is that with especially college students in particular, they get it word of mouth. And because they hear it from somebody who they trust, they think of it as reliable news. And so they just project it, and they will repeat it again. And if you ask them, they will have said, I have repeated information that was incorrect because it came from somebody who I thought of as a reliable source. Younger students would tell you the same thing. It comes from mom and dad. So if mom and dad are telling me, they wouldn't lie to me, but they're not thinking of like, oh, well, where is that information coming from? And maybe we need to verify that that information is true. When it comes for teachers and writing reports, there's a number of sources available now. The News Literacy Project has put a Checkology piece out there. The information literacy uses the CRAP model, which stands for credibility, reliability, relevance, authority, and accuracy and purpose. So there's things that you can do to look at stuff. But on an everyday basis, and this is where I think, we're not talking about research, we're talking about every day. How do you know what you're getting is good information? You have to take the next step and find it and actually look for it and really delve into it yourself.
I used to love that one of my go-to for media literacy was the Tree Octopus. I just love that site. I still use it as an example because it's fun. Right. You go and you do a workshop, or you want to have something that will really engage. Right. And that really does. I mean, I could have fallen for that. I really could have fallen for that Tree Octopus because, you could see there are videos, there are, articles that's on this. I just think
they did a really nice job organizing it. It looks legitimate.
Right. Forget about the fact that could an octopus really climb up a tree, live outside of the water. But, I don't know. I heard that they are really unbelievable. Back to that, where they can unlock things and they're like Houdini. So it could possibly, I could have fallen for it. I just want that out there.
Well, now we might be in the conspiracy theory place, so maybe we don't want to go there.
Anyway, so that's one of my favorite go-to resources as, to get students to. Is there anything that is an easy like go-to that you would send?
I love Snopes.com. I say it's Snoops. Some people say Snopes, SNOPES.com. I think it's a great resource to verify. And what I really love about them is that they cover not just truth and fiction, but they also say urban legend, or they'll say may have been true at one point historically, but is not true today. So they actually cover the gamut, which I think is fascinating. They do images, they do stories, they do news articles. So they're very good at verifying a number of different pieces of information. So I think that they're really, they're my number one definite go-to place.
And if let's just say just students alone, maybe not the adults in their life, but even if it was students that were leading the way by saying, I'm going to verify, I want to make sure that this is accurate. I feel like the adults in their life, if we are willing to learn alongside them, this could be a lifelong process to say, oh my gosh, we didn't have to, like I remember we had like a set of encyclopedias,
Right.
When I was in school, and you would just open it up and that was
your thing. Yeah, absolutely.
That was it.
I think I want to just say one thing too. I feel like there's been a lot of commentary lately about how people just go to Google and they accept everything that they see in Google. I don't know that that's necessarily true. I think it is true that people go to the first page of Google and they never go past page one, because I see that happen a lot. But I also think that I think that there's more to people than this one stream of thinking. And that's just from just even discussions I've had, whether it's with young adults or with college students or even adults. There are very few people have said to me, I believe every single solitary thing I see in Google. I have never spoken to one person who tells me that if it's in Google, it's true. It's not like that old saying, if it's in the New York Times, it's for real. There's more to it now, I think, than ever before. And I also think people realize the internet is very much the Wild West, and it has been for a number of years. And anybody, anywhere, from any age, can put anything on there. For now, who knows? Come a year from now, maybe not so much. Certainly in the EU, they're spending a lot of time and money and effort to sort of begin limiting down what the internet is doing in terms of gathering information and data and privacy and all of that. So I think that that's going to eventually shift and change the way we do things here in the United States. But, it's one piece of the puzzle. It's not all of it.
And just talking about what's happening for the EU is that it affects us, because if we are going to be connecting and collaborating globally, internationally, right, we have to follow
their rules.
Right.
Well, that's why, in the beginning, I forget the law that passed recently, and I apologize, I don't remember it's GDP or some GDPA or something like that. I'm not quite sure. I apologize. I don't want to give you the wrong thing. But once it went through, you were getting lots of emails asking you to accept their parameters on their website. And that was a requirement of that law. So if you were using sources that were outside of the United States, or receiving emails or newsletters, whatever, museum information, every one of those organizations had to send to their users or anybody who had been subscribed to them permission. You had to sign off that you agree to accept whatever they send you, which was very interesting to watch happen. And for probably a week, I must have gotten over 20 of them. Didn't realize how connected I was to other things, but it was definitely something to look at. We tend to sort of accept. It's kind of like why when we get apps on our phone or different programs, we don't bother to read those rules that are come down or those guidelines or any other permissions. And are you going to allow people to kind of go through and put up information? Of course. What are you going to read? The 10 pages that come along with it? Nobody's going to read that. Nobody has time. They're written.
A lot of legalese, and
a lot of legalese. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So it's another piece of I think the digital citizenship puzzle, but it's also another piece of media literacy as well. How do you teach kids, or adults for that matter, how to look at that information and know what kinds of information you're allowing other companies to take from you, or how much are you willing to give away? I think privacy
That
is a
brings
big
up that
conversation.
whole privacy piece too.
Yeah.
And I just wonder how informed teachers, like a district is, with teachers and parents on how they protect student privacy, like.
Here in Connecticut, the laws have changed. Well, statewide, federally, they've changed.
Right.
There's been a lot of guidelines put into place. Connecticut, in particular, actually has put even more stringent guidelines on that. So every program that is being used in school has to go through the state database now in order to be verified whether it's being used. Now, yes, we're all supposed to do it. Does that mean everyone is doing it? Well, it all depends if you have a technology person, a director or a CFO, or who's actually looking at all of that information to see if it's being processed. So it's become a very important issue in schools. Data privacy, especially student data, is a huge problem in terms of what parents are thinking acceptable to have and not have, and rightfully so. You want to know where that data is going, where that information is.
When we were just at the summit in St. Louis, we had educators from Connecticut, and that was like a topic of conversation, is that you couldn't, even though you had that classroom set of iPads or netbooks, it's not just any old app that you, even if it was free, that you could just download anymore.
Yeah. It used to be, in a way, it used to be kind of great that you could try some of these things and see what happens. But unfortunately, now every one of these companies has to sign off that they're not selling the information or keeping it or using it in any ill way.
Right.
It's a sign of our times in many respects. I think that there's levels of things that are different, certainly with social networks, since it's a personal account. That's a very different setup. And they actually don't fall within the student data privacy piece because it's a separate account. It's not the same. It's really when you're using something in the classroom where you're actually collecting student data, like their names, information, address, ages, grades, that kind of thing. That's where the concern really starts to flare up.
Okay, I wasn't even thinking about going in this direction, but when we're just thinking about privacy and like artificial intelligence and like, I know that there and emerging technologies, but Siri and the whole, do you have any perspective around media literacy and emerging technology and where that's going?
I think I'm a little wary of it. I think as a media literate person, you should be aware anyway. The wariness comes with the fact that we really don't know what is being collected. We're not, unless you're a coder or you're somebody who's on the other side of this, you don't really know what information is being taken and so forth. I think, certainly like Amazon has Alexa, the Siri that comes with the iPhone. I think when we start to delve into how much of us is being kind of swept away into the AI piece or even the virtual reality part, when we actually are starting to lose our humanity within this, that's when I think there should be a red flag. I don't know that people will pay attention because every time there's a new technology and a new tool, people jump on board. But I do think it's something.
Object, right?
Yeah, it's a shiny new object. Absolutely. I do think we need to be aware, though.
Because then I see this great opportunity for augmented reality, virtual reality, to have that sense of like empathy. I can literally experience something. And so from that digital citizenship piece, I see that the future of digital citizenship is an emerging technology. And as we both know, the future's already here. Sure. But like the AI piece, which I think is probably more intrusive than the majority of people really are paying attention to. There are times that like, I don't know what there's like a speaker on my desk right now that I'm looking at. And sometimes like it will just start talking to me. And when I wasn't talking to it, like, and it surprises me. And I don't know what I just did to activate it, So how many other, when you think about the wearables and, before our call even started, I was talking about my iWatch, that my eyesight, I have the wrong eyesight for such a small little thing. But as we continue to advance, there are going to be more things that are in our clothing and,
well, there's more than that. I mean, they're already starting with things that, are implants. Are you willing to be implanted with your technology? And I think some people are. And there are some things that are already in place. Like certainly with cochlear implants, for example, there's a technology that comes with that. But there's a lot of studies going on in other countries that are really, and probably here too, that, that we don't really talk about as much, but are people willing to all of a sudden have an implant of their technology? Do you want your phone to be a part of your body instead of a separate piece? I think those are the things that we definitely are heading into. And it'll be interesting to see where the line comes in. I mean, how much of this do you want in your life? And certainly that brings us back to probably the screen time, which is kind of where we started. But the reality is then you're digitally connected 24/7. When do you turn off?
I have noticed that just in my own journey, it was really important early on to do all the chats and to be, involved in any project that anybody wanted to collaborate. Right. And I have noticed that I've drawn back because like you're oversaturated. Right. There are only so many hours to the day. Sure. And there are times when it's just complete overload, and not just the need to unplug and be quiet, but like to be present in your life.
Right. Well, and I think that's incredibly important. And I always feel like I have this conversation a lot more with my college students every day, because the reality is you need to have that moment or those moments when you're present, because there's a lot more moments right now when people are engaged with their technology and not with other people. You see it when you go out to dinner and you watch couples on their cell phones or
families. Nobody's talking to each other.
Nobody's talking to each other. That's amazing, when you think about it. Or people who go out but end up on their technology. Why are you even out? Just stay home. It's amazing, right?
You should be so connected and still not connected, like still feel very alone.
Right.
Like I can tell you, and I know that I've talked about it a lot, but we went to a couple of Red Sox games. I can't believe I didn't go to one Red Sox game this season, but
what's wrong with you?
I know what's wrong with me, but now we're in the World Series. So okay. It's all good. But last year I remember going to a bunch of games, and then I would say to Curran, we're going to go device free. And he'd be like, what? Like, I'm going to, like, today's the day I'm going to catch the foul ball. And I would say, well, you were going to remember that moment. If that happens, you're going to remember that moment for the rest of your life. You don't need somebody to capture it, to remember it. Right. And, it makes me even think of like whether it's going to be preschool graduation, kindergarten graduation, whatever, high school graduation, how many people, or even it could be a concert, are watching an event through their device.
Yes. That's incredibly frustrating. And I think I know that for myself, I've been to concerts where I realize all of a sudden I'm picking it up and I'm recording pieces of it. And I'm thinking, wow, do I really need to be doing this? And putting it away, because yes, I want a few seconds of it. I don't need to watch the whole concert that way. That's not my experience. The experience is to be there in the moment while it's happening. Right. And I think that's true about sports games. As a matter of fact, I feel like at least in sport games, because there's so much action happening, there's a little bit more presence there. But by the same token, you think about it, if Curran had actually caught the foul ball, don't worry, there's probably 50 cameras that were following that ball who would capture the moment for him, or the 20 people sitting next to him who would just be there doing the same thing.
Right. And then, and it's, I would say that when I was a kid, you didn't bring, well, we didn't have devices, but you didn't bring a camera to an event. Like you took your camera out, I feel like at home for like somebody's birthday or a holiday, but you didn't go places. And so I would sell my teeth probably to have some pictures back, when I was a kid but I don't have them, but they are so real in my memory that nobody can ever take that away. And, but those opportunities that we've gone to the game, to Fenway Park, and then we've tried to engage with people around us. And some people will say, oh, well, we get here early, we take our pictures, and then we put our devices away. Or other people that are using their devices to score the game, or others that are doing like rainbow barfs on Snapchat or Pokemon, and like, not paying attention to the game. And we're trying not to make it like a lecture, but like engage in a conversation, just so people are mindful about their consumption, how they're using, their devices. And
No, and I think actually, I mean, there is something, look, there's certainly been a lot of research done about our brains on these technologies, without a doubt. There is something that's shifted and changed. I, I can even tell in terms of how much I used to love to read, and I still love to read, but it takes me a little bit longer now to engage with the reading, and I have to concentrate. That's the concentration piece. You don't really need the concentration piece with with the phones or the computer, unless you're doing something on the computer specifically. But on an iPhone itself, it's a concierge service. It's coming to you. All the stuff's coming to you. So this lovely concierge service is providing all these things and trying to figure out what it is that I need, and the whole thing. And it's not really fulfilling the need though, but it's trying to assume the need. And that's a really interesting distinction. Whereas if you need to concentrate and you really need to be focused on something like reading a book, it takes all of you. I think one of the things that I spend a lot of time also looking at is this idea of multitasking. I think we all assume we're very good multitaskers because of the lives that we live, and it is very busy and so forth. But the reality is that when you're in front of a computer or you're engaged on your iPhone, you're not really able to multitask. And there's been plenty of studies, and we could take a simple thing where I'm asking you a question and you're on the computer, and 2 seconds later, you pick up the last strand of what I'm trying to say. And we see that with the way people interact with each other. So clearly, there's this misstep along the way. We can't multitask with these devices in the same way. Can you listen to music and play? Sure, but and do some other activity, of course, because it's benign. People will say, well, I watch television and I do my homework. But are you really watching television, or are you doing your homework? So this is the thing, like it's so what it's on. It's just something that's background noise. So it's not actually filtering into the part of your brain that's engaging with what needs to get done. We are segmenting things. And that's part of, I think, this whole development of where we are with our technologies and how we feel about who we are as people with our technologies.
Well, it really, to me, I feel like is about a balancing act.
Yeah,
always.
Absolutely.
And, when we are going to be plugged in, to me, I want it to be I want to be that it's like the most powerful learning tool. Right. And I want it to be deliberate, and I want to be mindful about this. And I really want to make this about human connections, right, rather than that I'm mindlessly
right
with the concierge, Yes. And so, but if we model that, I feel like our youngest, we need to do this together.
Right. Sure.
And I need to model this. And I always will ask people about, when I work with adults, how many of you sleep with your device by your bed?
Right.
And the number of hands that go up, and, then you say, well, I want to welcome you back to the human race, because I want you to say hello, good morning, good night to the human beings in your household, or even the furry creatures in your household.
Sure.
So I think that's really, really important, is that balancing act between it all.
Right, absolutely, because all it is another extension of what we do, and it's another thing that we do, and that's so it's definitely problematic. I mean, it's an alarm clock, it's our check-in service, it's our tell me I have 10 minutes to go to work, or 15 minutes before this, or this is my ride and this is how I get here, and here's right. how we remap you if things aren't going, like it's an amazing, intricate, very highly developed way of really looking at who we are and assessing what is assumed to be needs. And I know I've said this before, but I think that's something that we need to know about ourselves. What are our actual needs, and how do we engage with these tools so that we know the difference between what we actually want and what we actually need?
That's fantastic. Well, I'm looking at the time, and I want to make sure that we get to talk about Media Literacy Week will be coming up in November.
Yes. So Media Literacy Week is coming up, and I'm actually double checking because I don't want to give you the wrong dates for that. It is going to be November 5th through the 9th. And actually, there are people who are doing things before on the 4th and ending things on the 10th. So, but the week itself from the 5th to the 9th, there's lots of different events happening all over the place, including one that you and I are going to be at, which is the Northeast Regional Media Literacy Conference in Providence, Rhode Island. So that'll be coming up, and we're going to be talking about teaching media literacy and digital citizenship and information literacy. So that'll be a nice little bonus for the things that we're going to do. And also there's the National Media Literacy Conference, which will be held in Washington, D.C. this year, June 26th through the 28th. At the museum, which was our big host, but we're going to also be at a lot of different places in DC for a couple of different things, including American University, which is going to host our research piece, and some other places which are to be announced.
That's fantastic. And last year you were in Portugal. You want to say anything?
Yeah. So actually, it's still this year, believe it or not. It was only in April. It feels like it's been a year, but it was just in April. So yes, we had the second International Media Literacy Research Symposium, and we had 100 people from different countries come and talk about the research that they do. Had a section that was just about digital citizenship. So it was interesting to see how digital citizenship is discussed and handled in other parts of the world. It was a fabulous experience. And I truly feel like whenever there are moments, which, like you said, are these moments in your brain that you'll always remember, this is definitely going to be one for me. Lisbon is a wonderful, wonderful city, welcoming to everyone. I can't say that one person has said to me that they had a terrible time. I would be shocked if they actually had. But we were hosted by the Coloist Gulbenkian Foundation, and they provided us a lovely space and gave us an opportunity to really engage with each other, which was really, truly wonderful. And it was just a fabulous place to be. So haven't decided when the next one is. I keep getting a lot of questions about it, and I'll probably be in the US, to be honest with you, because we'd like to do one in the US, one overseas, but you never know. You never know. I always leave it up in the air.
It's wonderful. And I want to make sure that for resources, anybody in the digital citizenship, world that's learning about or wants to know more about media literacy, namely, I feel like is a go-to resource.
Sure.
And hold on, I'm going to get my acronym: the National Association
for Media Literacy Education.
There we go. And any other that we should have on our radar?
Excuse me. Let's see. There are. I do a lot of work with the National Telemedia Foundation Council, which does the Journal for Media Literacy. And they are actually in the process of getting their work archived, but they're going to have a journal that came from the conference that's going to be out in the next few weeks. I think ISTE is a really good source as well, the International Society of Technology Education, which actually leading into our conference is going to be the ISTE conference in Philadelphia. And the American Library Association conference will be right before us as well in Washington, D.C. And there's a lot of, I don't know, I want to say like we're sort of like a trifecta in many ways. We're between and betwixt, and we delve into each other's areas in different ways. And I think it's a synergist relationship if we allow it to be. So there are a lot of resources there as well. The Center for Media Literacy in Los Angeles, I think, also provides a number of good resources. So there's so many, but I think those kind of give you sort of a
That's
myth.
wonderful. Well, I can't thank you enough. And when we started, it just happened. I don't know when I don't have a moment that I say, oh, that's exactly when we met, or that's when we worked together. I feel like this has been ongoing. Yes. And by the time that whatever our first meeting, in fact, maybe our first, when I'm thinking about it, was it the chapter before we met? No.
It was, we didn't meet face to face until after you wrote for me, I think, that chapter.
Okay, so that is,
but we had spoken.
Right. And I feel like our worlds have collided on so many levels that it just seems very natural that, we're still together. And I really consider you our go-to for media literacy, not just because you're here in Connecticut, but this ongoing, partnership and relationship. I'm just really grateful and appreciative.
Me too. And I feel like we have a lot of great dialogues on a lot of different subjects. And when we get together, it's kind of like this connection of different ideas. And we both walk away with like lists of stuff, things that we want to do and things we'd like to do together and things that we'd like to eventually do. And eventually we'll get to all of them, right?
Absolutely. Well, I'm excited about, I mean, the next one that I get to see you will be in Rhode Island.
Right.
So
right.
that
Absolutely.
is fantastic.
Right.
So I have, this is my first time doing this. So I wonder, I think I didn't even know how I'm supposed to end this. I think if I just end meeting, it's probably the end of our live on YouTube. But
Thank you for having me.
Even this all by itself is pretty exciting because we'll have an archive of this.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for kicking off DigCit Week with us.
It's great. Thank you again. I appreciate it.
All right. Wonderful. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Take care.
Bye-bye.